Good morning, everyone. Come, whoever you are welcome here. No matter your age, your size, the color of your eyes, your skin, your hair, you are welcome here. No matter your gender, whom you love, how you speak, or whatever your abilities, you are welcome here. You are welcome whether you come with laughter in your heart or tears in your eyes. You are welcome here. No matter what you have experienced in the past, no matter what awaits you in the future, you are welcome here. Whether you believe in God all of the time, some of the time, or none of the time, you are welcome here. This is a community of open minds, loving hearts, and willing hands. You are welcome here at South Valley Unitarian Universalist Society. Good morning, everybody. My name is Zach. My pronouns are he, him, and his. Welcome to everybody gathered in the sanctuary who have braved the storm, as well as those who are gathering over Zoom. We don't blame you. That's all right. Our worship team this morning is being led by Reverend Laura Young. Our Time for All Ages is led by Rob Carlson. Our musicians are Ricklin Nobis on piano and John Allen, our music director, as well as the South Valley Choir. Our sound and streaming lead this morning is led by Maureen Davies and Bob Scarborough, and our board greeter is Elena Hendricks. As we continue emerging from this time of pandemic, let us do so gently and with compassion for all those gathered here. Please keep your masks on and be thoughtful in approaching others for greetings. We're all in different places and contexts, so it's best to ask before shaking hands, hugging, and getting close to speak. We invite you to sing as you wish during today's service. We'd also like to extend an especially warm welcome to those who are here for the first time. We're very glad that you're here with us. If you'd like to get to know us better, we encourage you to fill out the connection card in the order of service or visit our welcome table following worship today. If you missed the QR code at the front, you can also find it in the hymnals as well, the hardback hymnals. We do have a religious exploration program for children and youth that meets weekly on Sundays during worship, and our director, Rob Carlson, is happy to answer any questions that you may have about that after worship. And of course, there's always a lot of different things happening here at South Valley, and the Happenings weekly newsletter is the best way to stay up to date on that. So be sure to subscribe to that if you haven't already. And just a couple of brief announcements to share before we get going. Our community will be making a trip to the Great Salt Lake on Sunday, April 10th, in partnership with Holiday United Church of Christ and First Unitarian Church, and our split offering recipient, the Friends of the Great Salt Lake. We hope you'll all join us in an afternoon of public witness, song, and silence as we honor this critical sanctuary and beautiful resource for our community. More details on that will be following in the Happenings later this week. And right now, I'd like to invite Dr. Jordan Roberts to speak for just a moment about our COVID guidelines here at South Valley.
Thank you, Zach and Reverend Laura. Welcome to everyone here. Happy to see your faces. So, as many of you know, we are, gradually hoping to return to more normal worship here in the sanctuary, with cases continuing to be on the decline, as well as the percent positivity ratio going down, hospitalizations. Fingers crossed, things are looking really good. I feel like we're in a really great, kind of time right now that could very well change, as we've seen before. We've seen other variants of the virus that have come and upended all of our progress, but I'm optimistic. I really am, and I feel like many other public health experts are, including the CDC, are in agreement that we are slowly coming out of this first phase of the pandemic into more of an endemic situation, which does not require these kinds of drastic measures. And it may take time for us to feel comfortable altogether unmasked, singing, sharing food, all of those things that we used to do without a second thought. But we will get there. I'm confident of that. As a task force, we met last week to discuss, some incremental changes to make. Some of those that you'll notice today will be in RE programs and OWL. We will have food available in the rooms. We just ask that people be conscientious. Again, such as Zach said, if you're eating, go ahead and take down your mask to eat, and then put it back up before you speak or socialize with other people. I really only think that this will be necessary for hopefully a couple more weeks, and then we'll be able to have services in person, unmasked. So it's kind of exciting. We're very hopeful. Hopefully we'll see the return of music and a big choir and all those things that we've missed for so long. I'm more than happy to answer specific questions that people may have about the science behind these recommendations after the service. Please come find me or send me a message over Facebook or by text, any way that you want. And so good to be with you. Thank you.
Let's sing. Feel free to stand if you'd like. Hymn 347 in the great hymnal.
All right, at this time, I'd like to invite Senya Eichbauer to help us light our chalice this morning. And as we do that, we invite you to stand in body, mind, or spirit as we all say our chalice lighting words. And you're welcome to use actions if you want. And those at home, of course, are invited to light a chalice and share with us in this ritual as well, if they'd like. All right, everyone. We light this chalice for the warmth of love, for the light of truth, and for the energy of action.
It is so good to be together in person again. I am the Reverend Laura Young, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. And on this snowy morning, as we gather together, I call us into awareness that as we do this gathering, we do so on the ancestral and current homelands of the Shoshone, Paiute, Goshute, and Ute tribes. As Unitarian Universalists, we acknowledge the complex history that was often violent, that resulted in the stealing of these lands, the unceded nature of them. And we commit ourselves to undoing harms. And we seek to authentically and with honesty engage in the necessary work that will bring about justice for the disenfranchised and that promotes healing for the whole of the earth and all of its peoples. As we settle into this time of worship, I offer you the following poem written by Reverend Gretchen Haley. She asks, "What's going to happen? Will everything be okay? What can I do? In these days, we find ourselves too often stuck with these questions on repeat. What's going to happen? Will everything be okay? What can I do? We grasp at signs and markers, articles of news and analysis, Facebook memes and forwarded emails as if the new zodiac, capable of forecasting all that life may yet bring our way, as if we could prepare, as if life had ever made any promises of making sense or turning out the way we'd thought, as if we are not also actors in this still unfolding story. For this hour, we gather to surrender to the mystery, to release ourselves from the needing to know, the yearning to have it already figured out, and also the burden of believing we either have all the control or none. Here in our song and our silence, our stories and our sharing, we make space for a new breath, a new healing, a new possibility to take root. That is courage. That is courage forged in the fire of our coming together and felt in the spirit that comes alive in this act of faith. That we believe still a new world is possible. That we are creating it already here and now. So, come, let us worship together. I just have one brief moment that I want to hold for us here in the sanctuary, and it is actually a joyful moment, which is to introduce our new administrator, Bailey. Bailey, if you could stand up. I know people on camera probably can't see you, but this is Bailey. She has been with us since the first week of January, but because we were unable to meet in person, many of you haven't had a chance to see her other than to see her emails coming back and forth on a weekly basis. So I encourage you to get to know Bailey and to give her our best welcome this morning. She is already transforming the way that I work, which is awesome. So I'd like to invite Rob to come forward now for the story for all ages.
Good morning, church. Good morning. This morning we begin our worship series theme of renewing faith, where in the midst of uncertain times, changing times, we are invited to consider, invited to ask ourselves what it means to have a robust faith for times such as this. And so as you listen to this story this morning, I invite you to consider where you hear opportunities for renewal and where there might be intersections between this story and your own journey in the midst of this season of change. This is a story from Mcemris. Being hurt or sick is never fun, and being stuck in a hospital room can be really scary. In many hospitals, there are ministers whose job it is to simply visit with people, sitting with them, holding their hands, and just listening. Being there so they won't feel alone or scared. A minister who works in a hospital is called a chaplain. Emily was a warm and grandmotherly kind of person who worked as a volunteer chaplain in a large hospital. She had rich brown hair and big circular plastic-rimmed glasses that made her eyes look even bigger and kinder than they already were. Her husband had passed away years before, and since then, she has comforted thousands of patients right there in the same hospital where her husband had once been a patient. One of Emily's favorite things to do was to play the recorder. Anyone else ever have the chance to play the recorder, maybe from as early as elementary school and maybe still? Yeah. She had lots of recorders, Emily did. Some were made of wood and some were made of metal. Some played high tones and others played lower. Some had crystal clear sound and others had softer, more soothing tones. She loved them all, but she did have one special favorite. Her favorite recorder was made of a beautiful dark wood, which was faded and pale from where her fingers had held it over the years. It made the clearest, purest, most beautiful music of all of her recorders. And when she played it in the hospital, the music echoed far and wide. She carried the recorder with her everywhere she went. When she went on a backpacking trip once, Emily carried her favorite recorder in her pocket, like she always did. But on the second night of her trip, she accidentally sat on it. She reached into her pocket desperately, hoping against hope that it would be okay, but it wasn't. Her favorite recorder had a terrible crack in it, and she was so sad. But she kept the broken recorder. When she got back from her trip, she tried everything she could think of to fix it, but nothing seemed to work. When Emily blew into it, no sound came out at all except the sound of her breath. All of her friends said, "Come on, Emily, can't you see it's ruined? You might as well just throw it away." But she kept it anyway. She continued to carry it around with her even though it couldn't make music anymore. One day she was visiting with a patient who also played flutes and recorders. He even made his own. Emily nervously said, "I know you aren't feeling very well these days, but maybe you can help me." She pulled out the broken recorder. "I was so stupid. I accidentally sat on it and the poor thing broke. Is there anything you can think of that might fix it? It's very special to me." And he examined it. "Well, it's a bad crack. Let's see what we can do." They sat side by side on the edge of his bed as he patiently worked on the instrument. When they were through, she held the recorder to her lips, eagerly, ready for the music to flow. But nothing happened. The silence was deafening. Emily's eyes filled with disappointed tears. "Thanks anyhow, really," she said to the patient, who looked apologetically into her eyes and shrugged, then lay back into his bed for a rest. After that, Emily still carried the recorder around with her everywhere she went. Sometimes she felt compelled to just pull it out and put it to her lips, just in case some magic might have happened to bring the instrument back to life. And one day, when she blew into that recorder, out came the most beautiful, quiet, warm, full tone she had ever heard. The music that came out of that miraculous old recorder had changed. Its voice was quieter now. It had mellowed from the clear, ringing voice of its youth to a sound like soft words or a gentle lullaby. Emily soon realized that this new sound suited the hospital perfectly. One day, as she did her rounds, she was surprised to see that the old musician who had helped her fix the recorder was back in the hospital again. He was very sick. "I'm so glad to see you again. I'm sad that you're sick, but the most amazing thing has happened. My recorder works again, better than ever." The old man smiled and said, "Let me see." Emily drew the instrument out of her pocket and handed it to him. He ran his sensitive, wrinkled hands all over the wood, tracing the scar where it had been broken. His eyes smiled. "We couldn't heal this break on our own, could we?" He went on, "But I see now what happened. The seasons changed." "What do changing seasons have to do with it?" Emily asked. "Well, you see, as the wood got wetter and drier and warmer and cooler with time, it expanded, and the gradual swelling mended the crack. And you were patient, loyal, and loving enough to let that happen on its own." Looking at her with his tired brown eyes, he handed the recorder back to Emily. He asked in a weary but satisfied voice, "Will you play it for me?" With grateful tears welling up in her eyes, Emily began to play, and the music that came from her favorite flute was soft and pure and beautiful. As the music filled that cold room to overflowing, even the busiest nurses passing by the doorway outside paused to listen. When she finished her song, he sighed contentedly. "Sometimes, Emily, it's the broken instruments that have the best sound," he said to her. And she knew that, yes, he was right. And now at this time, I would like to invite any of our young people, if you wish, to join myself and our leaders downstairs for our RE activities this morning.
This community, our church, and its many ministries are only made possible by the gifts that each of you give of your time, your talents, and your treasure. Many of you pledge monthly to support our work, and for this we're very grateful. Your gifts help ensure that we're able to live our values of love and justice in the world outside. It's of course our practice at South Valley to share our Sunday worship service offerings with an organization that shares our principles and values. For the months of March and April, we have selected Friends of Great Salt Lake, a local organization founded in 1994 that works to protect and preserve the Great Salt Lake ecosystem and increase public awareness and appreciation of the lake through education, research, advocacy, and the arts. They touch the lives of thousands of Utah children and youth through their Lakeshore Learning Program and summer camps. They sponsor the Great Salt Lake Issues Forum to encourage constructive dialogue and celebrate local artists whose works raise awareness of the beauty of the lake and the need to preserve and protect it for the future. Please join me now as we read our offertory words. They are printed in your order of service. We are this church. We are its hands, its heart, its voice. Together we share the wealth of this community and sustain it with our gifts. We will now be accepting the offering, and for those of you at home, you're invited to use the giving link in the online order of service. And at this time, I'd like to invite the ushers to come forward and share the offering baskets.
Thank you. So lovely to see the snow coming down in the midst of that. How much we have missed live music. For all that we have received and all we have found the courage to give, may we be truly grateful. May these gifts be a blessing to South Valley and to the friends of the Great Salt Lake. All gathered here today and in our virtual community are invited to participate in our ritual of joys and sorrows. Those of us who are joining us in the virtual community are invited to use the chat box on Zoom to share your joys and sorrows, and Zach will read them out from the lectern following the time of gathering here in the sanctuary. For those of us here in the sanctuary, you are invited to approach the altar here and place a stone in the water. Feel free to pause as you select your stone and to imbue it with your joy or your concern and gently place it into the water bowl. You're invited to practice this ritual in silence here in the sanctuary, and John again will delight us with his violin. At the close of the ritual, all who have wished to share have had their opportunity. I will place one final stone in the water to represent those joys and sorrows which remain unspoken, but still held in our kindness. I invite those gathered here in the sanctuary to process now to the altar. Please approach on the right and leave on the left.
We have a joy from Catherine for John and Ricklin, thanking them for the exquisite music, saying it was a piece of heaven. From Krista, frustration that insurance is refusing to pay for the medical treatment needed as she grows increasingly weaker daily. From Lori, sorrow for the people of Ukraine, especially Nazar and his family who created our welcome wall tree. From Becky for her nephew Chris, who is a first responder and has witnessed some terrible suffering lately.
For that which remains unknown, but still held in our hearts. Breathe in with me. for whatever part of you has not yet arrived, just breathe with me for a minute and settle into this space. Maybe you're someone who enjoys prayer, or maybe you're someone that's not so sure about prayer. I invite you to participate in this moment in whatever way, whatever door feels open for you this morning. I just offer us a space without words, a space where your heart can commune with this present moment. So just breathe.
Our reading today is Psalm 23 for this moment by Kevin Tarsa. May I remember in this tender moment that love is my guide, always, shepherding me toward ways of openness and compassion. I have what I need, really, with love at my side. Above me, below me, in front of me, behind me, inside every cell of me. Love infused everywhere. Just when the weight of the world I inhabit threatens to drop me in place and press my hope down into the ground beneath me, love invites me to rest for a gentle while and leads the center of my soul to the quiet, still, restoring waters nearby that somehow I had not noticed. And so love quietly sets me once again on its tender and demanding path, even when the walls close around me and the cries of death echo through untold corners, gripping my heart with fear and sadness. I know that all will be well, that I will be well. When love whispers near to me, glints at the corner of my eye, rests with gentle and persistent invitation upon my shoulders, yes, love blesses me, even as the sources and symbols of my pain look on. Love blesses me from its infinite well, and I turn and notice that goodness and kindness and grace follow me everywhere I go. I live in a house of love that will not let me go. I live in a house of love and always will.
I live in a house of love, love that will not let me go. I live in a house of love and always will. Psalmist Kevin Tarsa, following in the form of the original poem in the Hebrew Bible, calls our modern ears to a new consideration of this most beloved psalm. When I was a chaplain in hospice, the 23rd Psalm was one of the most often requested at bedside by my Christian patients. And I discovered during that phase of my ministry that the traditional opening line of "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want" has an alternate translation, one that I grew to love in my time in hospice. In the New Revised Standard Version, the opening line is paraphrased to begin, "It is the Lord who is my shepherd, that is why I lack nothing. That is why I lack nothing." I prefer this opening to the traditional "I shall not want," for the way that it places recognition of an abundant, ever-present love as the first frame for reading, rather than a "shall not" admonition. Our modern psalmist writes, "May I remember in this moment that love is my guide always," inviting us also, in this current context, to recognize that love's presence is steadfast and our journey through the landscape of our lives is always tended by love. Both versions note that our journeys are perilous at times. Our minds are often distracted and our hearts are prone to closing off to pain as a means of protecting us. Both versions point to the present moment awareness of what is as the pathway to open-heartedness and joy and trust in the midst of difficult and complex times such as these. In her book, The Case for God, Karen Armstrong, my favorite, super difficult to read theologian, writes, quote, "In pre-modern cultures, there were two ways of speaking, thinking, and acquiring knowledge. The Greeks called these mythos and logos, and both were essential ways of interpreting the world. It was considered unwise to mix the two. Logos, or reason, was a pragmatic mode. It was used to do things like build a house, organize society, invent new tools. But logos has its limitations. It could not assuage human grief or find ultimate meaning in life's struggles. For that, people turned to mythos, stories, that point us to ultimate truths, that unlock the mystery of our humanity. Myths were intended to be used as a plan of action that if we follow it, it allows us to find our own truths. It was never intended as an accurate account of a historical event. It was something that in some sense had happened once before, but also happens all the time." End quote. We are right now in a place we have been before. Emerging from the surge of COVID cases, struggling with new climate news, and watching another war break out, this time in Ukraine. We are all collectively wondering, how trustworthy is this new shore really? It is easy to get caught up in the what ifs and the oh no's of this moment. We have journeyed quite literally through the shadow of the valley of death these past 3 years. And we cannot know if we are truly through at this time. So what do we trust? And how can we be with this uncertainty? Becomes a critical question. Perhaps we need a new mythos, a new set of stories to guide us. The efficacy of vaccines and masking, hand hygiene and distancing, these have been the logos that have kept us going throughout the pandemic. But what of the mythos of this time? What of the truths that we have found and lived into these past 3 years? How has COVID instructed us about our interconnectedness? And what are the Psalms that we must now write and retell to future generations as reminders that they too can navigate difficult times? What must we carry ahead with us? Or to paraphrase the psalmist, what must we do to regain our footing on the tender and demanding path of love? Perhaps it could be as simple and as challenging as opening our hearts to all that is unfolding and trusting love to guide us back to this present moment again and again and again. For we know that our ability to act is only ever in the present moment. Our minds are fantastic problem-solving machines and terribly busy when left untrained in the ways of presence. And trust or faith in something greater than ourselves is not found in the thinking mind, with its proclivity for reviewing the past and anticipating the future. Trust or faith is only found in the present. Now, faith is a funny thing for Unitarian Universalists. We refer to ourselves as a faith tradition, and yet if you were to ask a Unitarian Universalist what they think it means to be faithful, the answers would likely be extremely diverse, including some of us who would reject the term altogether. As a community of seekers, we take seriously the free and responsible search for truth and meaning. And we are committed to engagement with sources of wisdom from many perspectives. For us, Scripture is held as equally revelatory as literature, science, lived experience, and the teachings of religious traditions outside of the Western perspective. And the beauty of this approach is the freedom to change our minds over time, to allow our lived experiences to inform how our humanity shifts and changes over time. And the challenge, of course, of this approach is the potential for our learning to be a bit shallow, picking and choosing truths as they fit, but sometimes lacking a solid foundation, the kind of foundation that consistently delivers us to the shore of wholeheartedness following difficulty. So what is faith? In a non-creedal, non-doctrine-based tradition such as ours, we often point to questions as the primary repository for faith. At our best, this means we encourage dialogue and inquiry as a process of sharing and learning, and at our worst, it becomes a refusal to seek answers beyond rejection of religious truths or adherence to questions and questions and questions. With the influx into our movement, a generation of unchurched folks, this binary if-and approach has begun to break down. Our new folks are hungry for a spiritual depth and instruction in the ways of communal living as a faithful people in the midst of the climate crisis and at the crossroads of the need to transcend binaries of sex, race, class, and nation state. They are not satisfied with esoteric and intellectual arguments. They seek radical inclusion and transformation of the binaries to something we can as yet only imagine. Journeying towards a society of radical inclusion takes faith. But unless we understand what faith is and how it can support this work, we will forever remain on the familiar shore with the familiar problems. Albert Einstein once wrote that, quote, "No problem can be solved on the same level of consciousness that created." So our call is to live into the unknown and to trust, to have faith that there is indeed a place of arrival beyond the next curve, and letting go of what we think it should look like. The call is to focus on what is actually unfolding. And this means that we may feel uncomfortable, confused, disoriented, and maybe a little upset as old patterns dissolve and new ones are yet emergent. The feelings that we are experiencing in response to the climate crisis are very difficult. Reading about the realities of plastic pollution and ocean acidification, wildfires, and rising temperatures can be quickly overwhelming and may lead us to feelings of despair and dread. And in order to protect ourselves from this, we may try to turn off our feelings altogether. That's a normal human response. We are in a difficult set of circumstances, and the known solutions will take tremendous courage and political engagement to achieve. We will need not just logos and mythos, but other means of creating understanding. Luckily, the Greeks have two others to offer us for consideration. There is also ethos, the consideration of ethics, and pathos, connection to our emotional selves. It seems to me that we will need to develop and utilize all four in our response to the climate crisis. We must use the scientific process, logos, to document the changes in the Earth's environment. We must use ethos to assist us in understanding that the climate crisis is a result of human industrial activity, and we have a responsibility to change our patterns of living. We must use mythos to imagine those new patterns, and pathos in order to navigate the current road, to stay in touch with our shared humanity. Our shared humanity may in fact be the most important of all four in guiding us to the right use of the other three. For scientific facts, ethical appeals to shift our impact and visions of a better future cannot and will not and do not and are not penetrating hardened hearts. But a heart open, willing and present to both the joy and the grief always does. My friends, the tender and demanding path through the climate crisis lies in our ability to feel fully and with courage the dying of the planet. Our beloved home. And to allow this grief to guide us onto the path of love. As a hospice chaplain, I often shared with families that the presence of grief, as overwhelming as it can feel, is a reminder of the love shared with the dying and the deceased. We are in a relationship with the earth. Do not believe that the earth does not love you back. She absolutely does. I would suggest to us this morning that the grief you think you cannot bear as you watch the climate devolve, the grief you think you cannot bear is actually the very path to our collective liberation and the revitalization of the planet. Beyond the grief, there is a new arrival, a new presence, and we will walk this path together and trust that love is at my side, above me, below me, in front of me, behind me, inside every cell of me, love infused everywhere. In a few weeks' time, we will journey to the edge of our Great Salt Lake and begin as a community to practice together a new way of being present to the earth. We will gather with our siblings in faith to listen, to sing, to lament, to pray, and to write psalms of love to the earth. It is an invitation to turn away from the old ways and to open the heart to love. And so today, this first Sunday of Lent in the Christian tradition, I invite you to give up the illusion that you must bear this burden alone. And I invite you instead to practice the present moment awareness of how love surrounds us all and invites us to live in beloved community. Let your heart be softened and renewed as we step back onto the path of presence and journey together through the valley of grief to the remembrance of joy. May it be so. Amen.
Let's sing. 1060 in the Teal Book might be a little new for some of us. I'm going to listen to it the whole way through and sing together. Feel free to stand as you choose.
As we sing of All right, everyone, please stand as you are willing in body, mind, or spirit, and join us in our actions as we extinguish our chalice. The words are in your order of service, and you're invited to say them out loud with me. We extinguish this chalice, but not the warmth of love, the light of truth, or the energy of action. We hold each other in our hearts until we meet again.
Please remain standing for the benediction.